One of our last topics for this class is painter's elevations. Now that we have the set fully designed, we've got most of the paperwork completed, we need to be able to communicate with those who will actually do the painting of the set, give the full finished color and detail for the full design. Ultimately, we need to be able to show paint samples for the scenic artists, giving them an idea of colors, different painting techniques that we would recommend using. Most of the scenic artists will then create a sample for us to make sure they understand what we're looking for. It's also an excellent idea that we present not only samples to them of how it should be painted, but we also give them colors. These colors represent the painting system that is at the school where I work, so there might be different systems used at different locations, and you want to talk obviously to the scenic artists in terms of the paint colors they understand that they use a lot. You'll want to use some of the terms, lay-in and spatter, and different terms that they understand, which obviously means you're going to need to take a scenic art class so you understand how to communicate with them and use the terms that explain the techniques. So ultimately, you'll want to give them color choices. Here are color choices presented with, again, the standard color number from the system they use. And then it also outlines what parts of the set are actually painted with these colors and with these techniques. Even better is to give them sample elevations. And that's where we get the term painter's elevations. Actual front drawings of each of the wall pieces that let them see the painting techniques in use and the final effect desired. Ideally, it'd be nice to combine all those ideas of colors and techniques and samples into something like this, which shows a brick wall piece that's going to be used, the full colors, with all the terminology and color suggestions for the mixes, and then also the techniques of how that is accomplished. That would be called a workup, and there are several ways of showing a workup for a scenic artist. One way is to start like at the right-hand side, number one, etc., etc. You can follow that down and get an idea of the layering needed to get the finished effect. But what this workup actually shows is from right to left, they get to see each of the techniques being used until the final effect at the far left is, number 9, is complete. Now, as an example, a recent production I worked on for Princess Academy at Brigham Young University. First of all, I provided them with some pre-mixed colors. Most of this work I did in Painter and Photoshop on a computer. When I actually wound up doing it, these ones with names and numbers are actually the colors I really did use. Each of the names on the color swatches talk about the technique that was used. So there's lay-in number 1 and lay-in number 2 and a comb and a spatter, different effects that were used. And then I have an insert that simply shows them the actual colors that I kind of mixed. These numbers, the 100, 108, 110, are actually the RGB mix that I had in Photoshop. I then, at the far right, took those into colors that match the coloring system, which was a Sherwin-Williams mix that the shop here uses, and that gave them the actual colors that are closest to those Photoshop RGBs. Then I actually gave them a workup in steps. So here is, because Photoshop does layers, as does Painter, I then showed them the first layer, again going back, using the lay-in color number 1, the dark gray. Here was the brush technique being used. And then number 2 was the second layer. You notice that I've moved over a little bit from the left, showed them the second layer, then the comb, which is the third layer, then the first spattering with kind of a butterscotch color, then the spatter of a green that started at the base and worked up towards the middle, then a spattering of a blue, kind of an ice blue that started at the top and worked down, and then an overspattering with a little bit of pink. And that would be the finished step. So at the far right, we show the full effect, and at the left, working step by step, we show the workup to the final rendering. Now, what I discovered though was, rather than this technique, because I was in Photoshop, and so I'm showing you the full screen of Photoshop, I could show them each of the layers, and on the right you'll see the layers, and we're currently on lay-in number 1, lay-in number 2, and so they're seeing the full effect in the window. There's the comb. Then there's the addition of the butterscotch, the moss, the ice, and the spring flowers. Each of those can be added in and out, and they're on separate layers. So that means I can turn off layers and simply go to one of them and show them how the comb, how much paint I actually applied, because that may not be as apparent if I'm actually showing them the full comb laid over the top of lay-in 1 and lay-in 2. It's not as apparent. They can see that something's been added. They can see the comb technique. But by proceeding to this layer, they can simply look at the layer by itself. And we can talk about that. I can go back and show them layer number 2. I can go back and show them one of the spatters. So the nice thing about having the layers in a Photoshop or Painter program is that we can look and analyze at each layer or get the full effect at the very end. Hopefully this gives you ideas of what Painter's elevations can do and how you might communicate with the scenic artists who will be working on your productions.